Well, welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Tanner O'Brien. I'm a senior partner here at Action Coach in Central Texas. Today, I'm sitting down with Max Kerr, who is the co-owner of Sleep Better Austin. So excited to be jumping in, having some conversation. Max, thank you for taking the time, first of all, and excited to just dive into it here. Why don't we just start with a little bit of background? Give us we'll call it the 10,000 foot view of who you are, and give us a little bit of a sense of the types of things that you're involved in these days.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for connecting with me. I'm glad we have a chance to talk. So my name's Max. I am a dentist by trade. I have a dental practice here in Austin, Texas. It's in a northern suburb called Cedar Park. And I've been doing dentistry for a little bit less than 20 years now. But really where I find most passion is a couple of areas. I help treat people that have sleep apnea. So that's the business Sleep Better Austin that I'm most excited about. And then also on the side, I'm kind of a geek when it comes to business, so it's a good thing that we're talking. I also help people implement business strategy, a specific one called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so, that's a chance for me to get inside businesses and kind of help people, I guess, get some degree of organizational leadership in their organization, as well as it gives me a chance, and this is a selfish thing. I really like to get my hands dirty in other businesses and see what they're doing and compare it to what I'm doing, and see if there's any, any gleans or any pearls that I can glean out of other people's business. So, but yeah, I geek out on making people and businesses healthier.
I love that. Totally love it. So maybe talk to me a little bit about that journey into, we'll just call it business, right? So
Yeah.
got into dentistry. Obviously, there's a number of things that need to happen, education wise, things like that when it comes to going through the process, become a dentist. Where did this passion or this interest in actual business come from? Was it there going into dentistry and you just kind of expressed it that way, or did it come at a later date?
Well, that's a great question. So when I got into dentistry, they never teach you how to run a business. And so for the longest time, I was an employee. And then I decided, you know what, it's time for me to make my own money and quote unquote hang a shingle, right? And so once I got into the business of dentistry, what I found was that, which I never really understood until I was a business owner, that just because you ask somebody to do it, it doesn't mean that it's actually going to get done. And just because you charge people money, it doesn't mean they're actually going to pay. And just because you've created this, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed anything at all. And in fact, I was making far less as a business owner than I was as an employee. And so I kind of went about trying to increase my skills both as a dentist and especially as a business owner. And I took this one course. It was a leadership level course for just being a leader in the dental field. And the reason I started taking this course was because one of my mentors, his name is Brandon Dawson, um, he said that there's this law of the lid, and he got this from John Maxwell. So the law of the lid, if you haven't heard it before, it states that in business, and Brandon broke it down into three lids. So there's the operational effectiveness lid, the belief lid, and then there's the leadership lid. And he said, if you want to run a level 10 business, you have to raise every single lid to level 10 because you're going to top out at whatever that lowest lid is. And so if you're an 8 at operational effectiveness and you're an 8 at belief, well then, but you're at a 5 at leadership, well then guess what? Your business is going to top out at a 5. And so I think for me, it was like, well, I think the greatest leverage point that I will have in business is if I can increase my capacity as a leader. And then so what I ended up doing is I just became a junkie, a kind of a leadership, seminar, book, anything leadership I was reading, I was doing, I was going through it, and I was teaching as many people as I could. And so then I started seeing the operational effectiveness lid just by proxy end up raising. And then so I was able to, really learn the bits and pieces of how to run not only an effective business, but making sure that the product is high quality in order to keep the engine turning, so to speak, because you can't kick out a negative product and still have repeat business. And so that's kind of where that juice came from. And then I always loved helping people. And so that's kind of where I kind of started not only helping my team learn how to be a better version of themselves through the business, but also really making sure that we allowed that to spill over into our patient care. And so, overall, it's been, it's a struggle, it's a journey uphill for sure, but it's been extremely rewarding. I always tell people that running a business is one of the most spiritual experiences you could ever have, because it's going to force you through the keyhole, whether you like it or not. And you better get relatively clean, both internally and externally, to be as effective as you possibly can at it.
Oh man, I love that so much. And I love you sharing the stuff with Maxwell and those types of things. Huge believer in have followed a lot of Maxwell's works personally. Really important stuff there. So when you look at the different businesses, the different things that you do today, um, talk to us a little bit about kind of what's your role today. Like if you were to kind of look at either the number of hats or the different kind of roles that you play within either the different businesses or just kind of generally speaking, what does that look like for you today?
Yeah, so thank you. Great question. So I was able to scale up my dental practice relatively profoundly, in that we would, with the idea of an ultimate purchase, right? So, just like when you buy a house, the day you think about selling a house is the day you buy it, right? And so I was fortunate enough to create a robust business enough that I was able to have a very effective sell in 2022. And so with my dental practice, I am now a minority owner in the dental practice, but I would still consider myself a general manager. So while I don't spend a whole lot of time treating patients in that business and that organization, I'm still making sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Now, when it comes to the dental sleep medicine business, which is Sleep Better Austin, I am still co-owner of that organization, and I am still treating patients within that organization. Currently, now we have scaled to be probably one of the top three dental sleep medicine providers in the United States of America, with aspirations of making it a nationwide business. We currently have 6 locations here in Austin, Texas, and 1 in Bentonville, Arkansas. So that's kind of where, my juices are really flowing and my passion currently is. And then, like I said, as an aside, so one of the reasons I was able to scale and get a sell in the business, as well as scale up Sleep Better Austin, is we had a really smart implementer when it comes to EOS. His name is Damon Neth. I would consider him a mentor as well. And he kind of taught me the ins and outs of the EOS system. And because I had so much fun doing it, and I lived it and I breathed it, I thought, this is something I could give back to the community around me from a business standpoint and make money doing it. And so that's kind of more of a side gig that I just find joy in doing. So I mentioned that we're maybe the third largest provider of dental sleep medicine in the US. And because it's a relatively niche really environment, so to speak. So people that have have sleep apnea, there's a main treatment, which is currently CPAP. And people really struggle with CPAP. CPAP is that machine that helps you breathe while you're sleeping at nighttime. Now, there's another treatment that's not quite as well known, but is almost just as effective as the CPAP, and that's an oral device, or we call it a mandibular repositioning device. And so that's what my business, Sleep Better Austin, helps people not only utilize but treat their sleep apnea with an oral device. And so it's a really beautiful way to really change lives without having to hurt people. Like, as a dentist, it's more like going to a almost like a trainer at a gym, right? You're going to go through some pain, but then after you're done, you did something good for yourself. But it's that pain threshold that's very difficult. Here, there's very low risk, low pain, and really the leverage point on getting good sleep ultimately impacts every area of life, including the health of the body, but just the mental health, and then the health of relationships, especially if you can have a clear head the next day. So that's kind of a roundabout question of where I was, what I'm doing, what I'm focusing on, and then what I'd kind of do on the side.
I love it. Absolutely love it. But I want to ask a question about, Sleep Better Austin. For those, if I'm in the audience and I'm trying to understand some of this a little bit more, I always like to ask the general question of like, who primarily does that business serve? And the way I like to frame it for this conversation is if I am in the audience and I'm watching this later on, How would I know that I'm a good fit to explore those services, or I might know somebody I should refer over there, or what should I just be considering or thinking about, hearing about this technology and the services that y'all provide?
That's a great question. So currently, to our estimates, about 1 in 4 U.S. adults, give or take, maybe 1 in 5, has some form of sleep disordered breathing. That is either extreme snoring and or airway collapse, which is considered sleep apnea. And so there's a broad swath of us adults that are not getting effective sleep. And a lot of people just aren't very aware of that. Personally, I think it should be a physician's role or a physician's duty to get a home sleep test for every patient that comes in for an annual checkup. But again, take that with a grain of salt because this is what I do for a living, right? But it so impacts the rest of our body that I think it's that important. And so like I said, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of US adults have sleep apnea. So people that, when we're talking to the audience, it's if you snore or if you wake up feeling unrefreshed, traditionally that's men. A lot of times women, what we'll see is they'll have an appearance of everything's really fit. They have a nice slender appearance, but they have difficulty sleeping, difficulty going to sleep, difficulty staying asleep, and then they have kind of an emotional dysregulation, almost a nervous or an anxiety about them throughout the day. This would be considered a high-strung individual or somebody that really feels or deals with a bunch of anxiety throughout the day. These are all symptoms of those of us that have sleep apnea. Now, our main customer, so we're a referrals-based business. So we ask for referrals from secondary care specialists like cardiology, urology, endocrinology, neurology, and all the ologies. And so because we see that there's so much body dysregulation when it comes in the form of poor sleep, these individuals, especially if they're having, let's say, diabetes, if there's a patient with diabetes and their sugar is dysregulated, oftentimes if we can get them sleeping better, then they can control their blood sugar. And the same with high blood pressure and whatnot. And so we have essentially two audiences. We're talking to physicians who are trying to do better for their patients, and we're talking to the people out there who are maybe a patient and they just know that something's wrong with their sleep, or maybe they've been told something's wrong with their sleep. So when patients come into my organization or Sleep Better Austin, we do one of two things. We either get a referral from a physician and there's already a sleep test done, or we have a patient that has never had a sleep test done. Traditionally, the role of a sleep test was that they would have to go to a lab, have somebody watch them with a bunch of leads and a pulse oximeter on their finger to get a test. Nowadays, we can do that in the comfort of somebody's own home. And so what we do in that case, if somebody comes in without a test and they know they have problematic they have problematic breathing or sleeping, sleep stages, then what we end up doing is we order a home sleep test for them. That is drop shipped to their house, and then there's a telemedicine visit. Once we get a diagnosis of either primary snoring or some degree of sleep apnea, then we can go about treating this individual with an oral device. So again, the primary treatment has always been CPAP. This is an alternative to that.
Very cool. So for those that would need or would be going through a home test, what does that look like? Can you give us the
Great question. So traditionally what it is there's like a little, you have a pulse oximeter on your finger. That's just going to measure the amount of oxygen you have in your blood. And then sometimes there's a nasal cannula to measure flow rate, and or there's a chest belt that goes across you to measure your level of inspiration. So with that information, I can tell how hard people are trying to breathe and whether or not they are, and also whether or not their oxygen saturation drops throughout the night. Now, if somebody stops breathing for 10 seconds or more, and they have a corresponding oxygen level decrease of 3 or 4%, then that's considered an apneic episode. If you have a certain amount of apneic episodes throughout the night, then you are considered to have a diagnostic form of sleep apnea. Now, there's different stages of it, but either way, any sign of sleep apnea or sleep disordered breathing means that we should actually treat that, just because, again, this is low-hanging fruit. We sleep a third of our lives. And so once we can get more people sleeping better, then the overall health of the community around us gets better.
Oh, that's really cool. I love the kind of breakdown of what that looks like more tactically for people like me that just really want to like get into it and understand it.
Yeah.
Um, uh, how or does this rise of fitness trackers and wearables and things like that now seeing a lot more that are tracking just sleep in general, does that play into kind of what y'all look at, or is it from your experience as a professional, is that a good thing for people to be seeing, or is that just not even good enough data? And kind of what's your take on some of the wearables out there for
That's a
sleep?
great question, and I get that question often. Now, as a clinician, I am concerned with the data that come out of wearables. That being said, as a human, as a member of the human family, I am thrilled that people are taking steps to take ownership of their own health. And I think for the longest time, we've outsourced that to whether it be the food industry or the medical industry. You know, we've always wanted people to tell us whether or not we were healthy. I think now having these wearables can we can see if we're healthy or not. The problem is, I feel with these wearables is the data is not, there's no follow-up step and it's not conclusive enough for there to be a diagnostic step.
Mm.
That being said, we get a lot of patients that come in, they're like, hey, I cannot get my sleep scores up. Can you help me? And then we can just order a test, and that works really well. When I do on the flip side of that, there could be some hidden, there could be some data points that maybe you're not as efficient and not as precise that are masking other symptoms. I don't sleep very well, but my Fitbit says I slept just fine, but their oxygen saturation is just bouncing throughout the night. And so, what I did see, because I wore a Whoop strap for the longest time, what I noticed is it trained me in sleeping longer. It helped me reduce my dependence on alcohol a little bit. I realized, oh man, if I drink, man, my recovery is crap. And so it allowed me to kind of be a lot more self-aware and dial in the habit of sleep. And so I think for that, it's a really great tool.
Very cool. So let's shift gears a little bit. I want to go back into kind of the conversation around business. EOS implementer, you used it and had somebody help kind of implement that as you scaled and grew business. Um, what's your favorite part when you look at just kind of the different pillars within business, from marketing to sales to operations to team building, finance, numbers, like all of that stuff? Kind of where do you see your greatest amount of passion when it comes to business?
Well, my strength is organizational leadership, right? So I am really good at getting teams together and then making sure everybody kind of marches to the same beat. That's one way that I feel like I can lend value to an organization around me. Every once in a while, I'll have a good marketing idea. When it comes to operations, I'm just not detailed enough to really make sure that everybody's following process. And when it comes to managing, I'm not the greatest manager. I'm usually more of in the visionary seat, or a little bit hot, head in the clouds and more strategic decisions and whatnot. But when it comes to making sure culture is on point, as well as making sure that everybody's rowing to the same beat, setting vision and following up with that vision, that's where my strength is. And also, and that's kind of what EOS is all about, right? Setting a strong vision, making sure that everybody's aware of that vision, making sure you have the right people in the right seats, making sure that there's clear data that we can make decisions upon, making sure that when issues arise, we adequately identify those issues and then solve those issues, making sure that there's clear processes that everybody is following and that's trained upon, and then ultimately making sure that there's a clear meeting pulse, and having some degree of traction towards the organization's vision itself. And so, I set that whole pie up and make sure that everybody's running accordingly.
Very cool. When you look at just kind of your journey, pre EOS to going through EOS, now working with other businesses and all of that sort of thing, um, what was what was maybe the area within business that you had to grow through the most? Maybe like a roadblock or a challenge that you had to overcome, anything like that that you can kind of share a
Yeah,
story about?
that's a great question. You know, the one that pops up to mind when you ask that question is the fact that I was the bottleneck and I didn't even know it. So for me, a lot of times what was happening is I was the sole owner of every single decision in the organization, just because I thought that that's what my role was. And I didn't realize until I started externalizing those decisions to my departments and my employees. And really, ultimately, that's my role as the leader, is to help people come up with not only the best solve for their issue, but also empowering them to follow through with whatever they thought the best solve was. That's where the bottleneck was, and kind of the pain point that I ran into is I one time, and I remember it completely, or very clearly. I was sitting with a patient. I was actually working on a patient. When you're working on a patient, you really want to be focused. I mean, you have a high speed drill in their mouth. You've numbed them up. It's costing them a great deal of time, a great deal of money, and a great deal of emotional pain. And so having that focus is so important just for the patient alone. And no less than 5 times did somebody walk through the door, ask me a question, and then leave. And it was a different person every single time. And I looked at my patient, I said, "Do you see this crap that I gotta deal with all day?" And, you know, in a kind of a joking way, but not really, right? Like, it was like, "Hey, this isn't fair to me, it's not fair to you. This shouldn't be happening." And so when I read the book Traction, one of the things that really jumped out the page on me to me was the idea of having an issues list. And like when somebody comes up with a problem, as long as somebody's not bleeding, you know, nobody's in physical trouble, then you just say put it on the issues list. And so that's a way for them to keep their issue, and then park it, so they know that at some point in time, me or a group of us will get to that issue, but it doesn't have to be answered at that moment, that time. And so just allowing me to come up for air with the issues list is kind of what drove me into learning a little bit more about the entrepreneurial operating system, and utilizing that for not only my whole organization, but just sometimes in general in my life.
I love that. I love the story behind it, and I'm sure it's one that probably connects with a lot of folks that
Oh yeah.
are
Well,
watching this
anybody who's
later on.
running a business knows what it's like to be the end all be all of all information in the organization, whether you got it or not, right? And so um, that's why, as I've grown as a leader, I've realized that if it's not something that directly affects me, if it's not a conversation or a decision that I personally have to make, which I only have a handful of them now because I've scaled myself out. Now, I want to empower people who really own the problem to solve that problem. And the more you're able to do that, the better the organization runs.
Mm, fantastic. So when you look at the next 3 to 5 years, what does that look like for you? How does Sleep Better Austin continue to grow? What does that look like in your vision for the next 3 to 5 years, and kind of where do you see your role within some of these businesses, and just kind of your role in life continue to grow over the next couple of years?
That's a great question. My focus over the next 3 to 5 years, specifically with Sleep Better Austin, is to scale it into a multi-state practice, with as many branches as I could have throughout the United States of America. I think within 7 years, we want 100 locations. So 3 to 5 is probably going to be close, anywhere from 50 to 70 locations. The reason I really want to do this is because I truly believe that if we can empower people to take better control of their health, then not only will the craziness of the current, state of the union kind of get better, because everybody's well rested and can maybe have a little bit more less anxiety driven thought, but the overall health of the nation is going to get better. Not to mention we'll be able to make good money doing it. But isn't that the way that the greatest businesses roll? Is like, you provided a huge degree of value for the people around you, and then you are able to accumulate wealth through creating value for others, and
Mm.
that's the ultimate goal for me. um, Now, when it comes to how EOS plays in this, maybe I could see myself implementing in my own organization, but really the focus will be scaling Sleep Better Austin to being a nationwide organization that that really impacts as many lives as we possibly can. Our goal, and I think it's a shy goal, but our main goal is over the next 5 years, we want to make sure that we're saving the lives of 20,000 individuals with the help of oral advancement devices, which is what I was talking to you about earlier. And so it's going to be a heavy lift, but I think we got the people to do it.
Excellent.
You got a little daughter back there looking in. I
Yeah,
told mine, you got to stay up in the front.
it's not usual.
Yeah.
Um,
It was either going to be you or me, buddy.
oh well, that's what happens, and as we go and everything here. So, well,
Well, hey, man, that's it. But that's why we do it. We do it for them. We want to make sure that we're creating a business and creating a lifestyle that we want and not what the organization wants, right? And
yeah,
so sometimes I think that gets lost in the shuffle with the grind mentality and everything like that. One of the safest spots that I have is when, I think the P&L's off, or maybe I'm having trouble with payroll, or maybe I have a key employee that's upset about one thing or another. I can come to my house and I can sit down and my daughter can get in my lap, and I know that she could care less about what's going on in my professional world. And dude, the amount of peace that gives me for just 5 seconds is worth the price of admission.
oh, that's such a good way to look at it. Absolutely amazing, and yeah, the kids have no idea.
Yeah, I know, and I don't want them to know.
At least not yet.
Yeah,
Let them learn some of those lessons as they grow. Um,
amen.
Well, Max, we've covered a lot of ground. I want to be respectful of the time that we have here, and I've got a few rapid fire questions. I always love to kind of ask and get it's really just some wisdom nuggets out for the audience here.
Yeah.
So when you look at kind of your journey throughout business, throughout kind of everything that you've accomplished so far, what would you say for you has been kind of your key to success?
Man, that's a great question. And it's like a gumbo, right? Like there's all these different ingredients and you don't know how they got together, but somehow they did. And now all of a sudden the gumbo is tasty and you wish you would have wrote it all down, right? But for me, it was one thing that stands out in my mind is I was sitting in my sauna in the middle of the pandemic, and I heard all these voices of negativity in my mind of, this is going to happen and this is going to happen and the world's going to fall apart and business is going to be crazy. And then like I had this moment of clarity where I just kind of told all those voices to be quiet for a little bit. And then I heard this one little voice in my head saying, hey, whatever got you here is going to get you through wherever you go. And so it's that whole proverb of the bird doesn't trust the branch, the bird trusts its ability to fly. And I think leaning into that and really understanding that no matter what, I'm never going to fail. I'm just going to learn my way through things is probably the strongest. That gives me the most encouragement, not only in myself, but my faith for the future.
Hmm. Absolutely love that. Um, what about advice? If you could give just one piece of advice for other entrepreneurs, other business owners out there, what piece of advice would you want to leave them?
You know, that's a great question. What bubbles up when I see that is like, follow up leads, and not so much when it comes to business, but if your buddy said, hey, I read this really good book, you should check it out, read the book, or at least listen to it at 3 speed or whatever. If it resonates with you, put it into practice. Because there's so much amazing information from people like you, people like me, those of us that have gone through and dealt with a lot of the challenges that you're facing right now. Man, we're out there and we're more than willing to want to talk about it. And I'm going to be asking that from you. I'm going to be asking that from other people. The knowledge is there. So just kind of follow up with that lead. If there's something that you feel like you need to do, or a book that you need to read, or a lecture that you should attend, just go and do it. And at least you can trash it if it's not any good. But if it's going to give you that next step or give you that 10% more of what you need, then that's how we keep it going, and that's how we elevate to the levels we need to be.
Mm. Now that is a really good piece of advice. Um, on kind of that note, how about book recommendations? Any book recommendations that you would give to the audience? It can be business. It doesn't have to be business. If you prefer to, recommend a podcast or anything else like that, you're more than welcome to. But what recommendations do you give the audience?
Well, so there's three. So I'm a Tony Robbins fan, and Tony Robbins always says "Man's Search for Meaning" is one of the greatest books he's ever read, and I would agree. I think that's one that I probably read every 3 or 4 years just to kind of remember what it's what our choice is. Essentially, we get to choose how we interact with the world around us. Of course, as an EOS implementer, I found that some of the greatest and most clear insight that I got into running an effective business was with the book Traction by Gino Wickman. And then most recently, I every year my leadership team reads five dysfunctions of a team.
Hmm.
That's a perennial. Like I read that once a year. And what's wild about that, you read the way they say no man can walk through the same river twice, right? For it's not the same river and he's not the same man, right? And so you get to read this book and different things based upon what you're dealing with pop out at you. And I just think it's so easy and so easily digestible. And it doesn't take any time to read. So I always recommend that one.
Oh my goodness.
And that's Lencioni.
That is fantastic. These are amazing recommendations. Absolutely love the last little bit that you shared there. I literally this morning was writing just a blog post on that concept of only it's you never read the same book twice.
Yeah.
Your experience, all that kind of stuff changes.
Totally
So
changes it. The different words bounce at you, and you're like,
yeah.
maybe I read that, but it didn't mean anything to me, and now all of a sudden it
Mhm.
means something to me. You can always glean wisdom more than once.
Oh yeah, I love rereading books, and I've got kind of my
Yeah,
handful that I make sure that I go back to every year, and just it always hits a little bit differently.
exactly.
So Max, for those that are in the audience that are watching this later on, where can they go for more information? How can they connect with you? Where do we want to advise them to go to check out things online?
Well,
Where would you advise them to go?
you said that, and I didn't mean to. I don't really know my socials all that well. I have a social media account, or my Instagram is, I want to say it's Dr. Max K on Instagram. I'll put a bunch of sleep information on that one. I also put a bunch of sleep information on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling that now, and I think that's the Max Kerr. If you're interested in any more sleep stuff, sleepbetteraustin.com is kind of how you can get a hold of me. If it's about business, I can geek out on that, and you can DM me at any point in time with any of those, any of those social media profiles, and we can just geek out about business, and I can do that too. So
Awesome. I love it. I will make sure to put all of that in the video description below. I know we connected on LinkedIn, so I'll probably
yeah, there's
throw that
LinkedIn
in there
too.
as
There you
well.
go.
But highly encourage those that are watching this to, at minimum, just go click on either Instagram or LinkedIn or something and send a direct message. Say, hey, saw you on the business spotlight. Phenomenal conversation. Yes, you have to say it's a phenomenal conversation,
Exactly.
and just kind of make that connection here because I think it's really important, especially for those of us here in Central Texas, just make some of those connections
Yeah,
and
for
build
sure.
community. So, with that, I have one final question I always like to end kind of these conversations on. That's simply, what is most inspiring to you today?
Well, I think we touched on it when your beautiful little girl walked through the door earlier today. We're living this life for other people. And if there's any way that I can find joy, it's remembering that over and over again. And then guess what? My life is exponentially better because always remember that. So do as much as you can for others as long as you can.
Beautiful. Max, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a genuine pleasure to dive in and just hear more about your story and the passions that just completely come out in this conversation. So thank you
Yeah,
so
I'm
much.
dude. I'm super glad you reached out, man. This has been really neat, and I appreciate what you're doing.